We all have our demons.
Not enough pain.
What is up, YouTube? It's Kaylriene here with another video. Today I want to talk about my first impressions in Antorus, the Burning Throne for World of Warcraft. It just came out this last week, and there's been a lot to be excited about if you've been playing WoW. New raid after what can only be described as the disaster of Tomb of Sargeras. And I think that Antorus is okay. I want to kind of explain that here with this video. Antorus is a pretty good raid so far. It's worth noting before we get too far into this that I am 7 out of 11 in normal. My guild normally does normal into heroic, so we'll probably be clearing normal for a few more weeks, and then it'll be off to heroic to get that done. I really like it so far. I do think there are things that need to be addressed, and that's what we're going to get into here today. So first of all, on the positive side, I like that the fights are varied and different. There are a lot of different implementations of mechanics here, which was a lot of people's primary complaint with Tomb of Sargeras, is that you just had too much soaking, too much repetitive kind of mechanics. And what we see now with Antorus is actually a bit of a reversal from that, which is nice. It's good to have different mechanics. Yes, the first boss does technically have a soak mechanic, almost as a joke. But overall, the mechanical design is a lot better, I think. There's a lot more interesting stuff to kind of dig your teeth into. There's more variety to fights. And what I like in general is that a good number of fights allow you to kind of select how you deal with mechanics a little more. Stuff like the Fellhounds allow you to use positioning and trickery like that to make the fight go a little bit differently. Similarly, the first fight, the Garathi Worldbreaker, actually gives you the option to just flat out change what mechanic you deal with. If you really hate soak mechanics after all of Tomb of Sargeras, guess what? You can actually choose not to do a soak mechanic. You can destroy a different cannon and do it that way. Now, it's usually easier to just deal with the soak mechanic, but you do have that choice, and that's a good thing to offer. Visually, I do like that there's a bit of different visual sets in play here. Yes, we'll get into some of the cons of that here in a minute, but I like that there is a good diversity of colors represented. It's not all green. It kind of follows what we've seen for a lot of Tomb of Sargeras, which is that they're sort of wings by color. In Antorus, there's like a green wing, there's a red wing, and then you get to the end and there's like a blue boss, to be precise. So you get some different, you get some visual variety, which is good. I like the loot so far. I think some of the stuff is pretty interesting. As a tank, I actually got this Riftworld Codex trinket off of Portal Keeper Hazabel, and I really like it so far. I know it's not super good for me, but I've never really had particularly good trinkets, although I do have Archimonde's Hatred Reborn, which is pretty nice, and upgraded to level 1000 now, so hooray. But I like that there's some interesting stuff. Having said that, the trinket selection is kind of weird this time out. It's not quite as diverse and super powerful as it has been in the past. A lot of the last tier trinkets in past raids have been like just ridiculously powerful, and this time out they're not quite the same, which is okay. I don't think that's a problem necessarily. I think it's kind of nice that there's a bit of balance in that way, but it would be nice to see, I don't know, something like super mega powerful. Well, I mean, to be fair, the Pantheon trinkets absolutely fill that niche, especially the Aman'Thul's Vision. So there are trinkets that exist that are very powerful. It's just that they're not littered through the entire raid. It's basically get to the last boss and this is your reward. And to be further fair, they're only really mega powerful if your raid has enough procs to get the Pantheon effects active. I like the diversity of bosses. I like that for a Legion raid, and against the lieutenants of the Legion and the leaders of the Legion. It's nice that it's not all demons and Eridar. It is mostly demons and Eridar, but at least there's some, you know, some difference in the bosses there. Now, having said all that, I kind of want to get into the cons. I want to start with something that is both a pro and a con, I think, and that is the difficulty of normal. I haven't done heroic yet. I've heard heroic kind of has the same problem, which has me concerned, which is that a lot of the fights in Antorus are too easy. I don't mean they're too easy in that they're mechanically not difficult enough. Like, there's enough stuff there to kind of sink your teeth into, as I said earlier, but the problem with it is that it doesn't require a lot of strategic finesse. This can be good or bad. Like, Tomb of Sargeras had a lot of execution check fights that effectively required everyone in the raid to execute really well, and if one person screwed up, then the whole raid was done, which is not fun raid design. Antorus takes it too far in the extreme, which is that nobody can really mess anything up, because everything that you could mess up in theory is pretty easily recoverable. We had a couple of fights where, like, the only thing that really and truly messed us up was sort of long-term decay in our execution. So things that, you know, if we allow things to fall apart for a very, very long period of time, it becomes a bit of a problem. But if you have even just very basic, steady execution for most of the fight, you're going to do okay. We did Portal Keeper Hazabel in 2 attempts with no strategy. We actually quite literally had a very basic, like, overview type version of it where we just used what was in the dungeon journal and what one person had seen in like 1 or 2 videos, and we just went with it and it worked. Similarly, King Garoth, we had kind of a loose idea of how King Garoth worked. He was a fun fight. He had some interesting quirks. We got him down pretty quickly. I think it was like 2, maybe 3 attempts on him. We just had some execution finesse that needed in the last part of the second pull. Varamathras, we actually got pretty dang close on a second attempt at the tail end of our last raid night last week with no strategy. Like, all we knew is that the debuff happened and that tank positioning could vary a little bit, but like the Fat Boss guide suggested having someone on the front and someone at the back of the boss for the tank positioning. And knowing just that and not even knowing how to deal with any of the debuffs, we got him to like 40%. So it was, it's a little too easy in that way, which I stress about a lot, because what I could see potentially happening here is that if this indeed is the last tier of raiding and Legion, and we don't have any additional raid content for the rest of the expansion, that's going to not really tide us over. That's not really going to tide us over, to say that more correctly. It's okay. Like, I don't dislike this strategy of making the bosses easy, and then maybe the incentive is to do heroic, do achievements, do mythic if you can get the people for it. But if this raid tier goes on for too long, that's going to be a terrible idea. Like, the thing that I worry about most is that this raid tier lasts 12 months. It's just what it is, which is this really simplistic, overly easy set of encounters. It gets a little scaled up on heroic, and then we just move on from there, and we wait for Battle for Azeroth to come out. Now, from what we've seen this week from the 7.3.5 PTR, there will be content in that gap to hold us over, but what we don't know yet is what the full nature of that content is going to be. We know there's going to be something to do with Silithus. We don't know what that thing is yet, other than the battleground for the scavenging shore or salvage shore, whatever it's called. Which, I mean, that's content there, and there's some quests, and it appears there's going to be some Silithus stuff, like beating up on Silithid mobs to, you know, take their brains and study them. But outside of that, we don't have a whole lot on the slate left. 7.3.5 doesn't seem to have too much other than a few major story quests. And I'll be fair, those are major story quests that are going to be interesting to watch unfold. But I have my doubts about whether or not this strategy is going to be viable or everlasting. And it depends largely on how long it takes for Battle for Azeroth to actually come out. But I've belabored that point quite a bit, so let's go on to some other stuff. The visual theme of the raid starts off straight away with Legion green. It is very green. It is very fell green. We've had fell green in the game for about 2.5 years now, in just about every facet we've seen. It's boring. It's uninteresting. As a demon hunter, a lot of the architecture in Antorus matches our class hall, which is okay, but I've been seeing it for 1.5 years now. So it's not particularly exciting or interesting to me, and that is bothersome. Outside of that, the other color themes are a little bit better, but even then, like, the red still feels kind of very, very similar to Hellfire Citadel in that way, in that you have fell green, and then it transitions to, like, dark demonic red, and that's the majority of your color palette. It's only at the tail end, when you get to Argus, the Unmaker, that you all of a sudden have, like, this nice blue room with these cool visuals. And then in the middle, there is also ENR, whose room is awesome. Like, I'll give you that. It's an incredible looking room. I like Titan visuals. I like lush green nature. Nature green, not fell green. But having said that, it's not a color palette I care to see much of anymore. I'm super over it. It's run its course and then some, and then it had a second wind, and then it ran its course again. I'm so done with fell green. I need something else, please, for the love of God, Blizzard. Something that is not fell green next patch. Please. Granted, Silithus is going to be this new, like, piss yellow gold filter thing they're doing for Silithus. So, hey, I mean, that's fine. It's different. My beef with the coloration of it aside, I think it's different, and that's good. It's good different, it's not bad different. I just like making fun of it because it is very much, you know, it's a very interesting shade of yellow. Anyways, moving right along from that point. For all the boss diversity that's in there, I do feel like there's still kind of a lot of demons that we've been seeing and not a lot of really cool stuff. Antorus High Command has some cool models in terms of, like, their armor and the stuff they wear. Grothi Worldbreaker is a cool concept. I really like the whole, like, the visual of the boss. That's interesting. I always like the super giant bosses where you can't even see where they originate from. That's a really cool concept to me that I enjoy quite a bit. Oh, look, the Blink-Dakar. But yeah, there's Shivara. Varimathras' new model is excellent, so I'll give you all the props in the world for that one. Kingroth looks cool. I can't deny that. The Titan models are great, so as you get later on in the instance, the stuff gets better and better, so I think that is fair to say. But the early part just kind of reeks of, like, a lot of reused Eridar and Demon models that we've seen. Fellhounds of Sargeras are cool looking, I'll give you that. I'm very excited to be able to get a mount from one of the two of them. So, someday, hopefully. Other cons, I feel like, yeah, the other thing is that the layout of the instance is very awkward. The way that you go between bosses just doesn't feel interesting. Like, just, let's look at the map here for a second, right? So, when you first zone in, you pop out over here, right? You don't really have an option. You go to Grothi Worldbreaker first, and you get this thing right here is a little cliff you drop down to get to the actual room where you fight Grothi Worldbreaker. Okay, fair enough. You kill Grothi Worldbreaker, one of the little Vindicar portals pop up and give you an option to get back up the cliff. But it doesn't really tell you that's the case. It doesn't tell you that that's a return point. So a lot of our raid clicked it and started running back around thinking that's how you had to do it. And it isn't. It's not at all. That is not it at all. You actually have to continue on down the path, and then you have to take, like, this branching path over to Fellhounds of Sargeras, or you can go over to Halls of the Boundless Reach and take on Portal Keeper. You can take on A&R from there. You can also then go over to Antorus High Command by going up and around. The problem is it's just not really well laid out. And I've talked about this in the past when I've written, particularly about how flying in Argus may not be that bad of a thing. Or rather, not having it is not that bad of a thing. What bothers me about it in the raid is that, like, okay, so it does look like a place I'm not supposed to be. It definitely captures that feeling. The problem is that it doesn't really easily tell you where to go unless you're looking at the map. Like there's not necessarily a strong intuitive flow, and it feels really easy once you start clearing more bosses to get really lost. Like we actually lost, I think, probably close to 10 minutes this week, just like trying to figure out where the fuck we were in the raid. So not great. I won't complain about that too strongly because I'm the one who's like, yeah, authenticity is great and having an environment that looks like we don't belong there is great. So I'm going to eat my words there and say, you know what? Maybe sometimes it's not the best. I wish in the raid here, certainly it was done a little bit better. It'd be nice to have a little bit more sense of guidance or direction. But I got what I asked for, so hooray! Outside of that, the raid portal itself, like the location of it's the most god-awful idea ever. As a demon hunter, I have it pretty easy. Like, I don't have to do terribly much there. I can just jump down and grab it, and I can glide over, so I don't even have to worry about the lava. For those that are not demon hunters or don't have, like, goblin gliders, enjoy your life. That's gonna suck for the next, 6 months. But I think that's a relatively minor quirk. What I do like about that, and there is a positive to that too, I think, is that it's very symbolic and reminiscent of Black Temple. It's like reverse Black Temple. Illidan is now leading the charge. Oh, I forgot that was my macro. Anyways, Illidan is now leading the charge to take over a Legion stronghold. And you do it much the same way you did Black Temple. There is a giant ornate front door that you could go through in theory, but it's like littered with enemies and just all of this nasty shit. Your best option is to sneak here through the River of Fel, where all you have to deal with is all the wildlife that's native to the area. And hey, look, a raid portal. It's a cool concept. Like, I do like it. I do like that. I feel like it's intended to evoke the Black Temple like motif, and it's supposed to get you thinking about that. Especially the whole like full circleness of it with Illidan coming back to help with the raid rather than being the main villain and all that. But you could have accomplished this without putting it behind all of this. There's a way around that appeals to that nostalgia all the same. So I would have liked to have seen a slightly better implementation there. Let's see. I'm just thinking, this is kind of freeform, so I'm just kind of going through my list of complaints here. I think that's probably about it, honestly. I'll have more impressions undoubtedly this next week. I'm pretty sure we're probably going to be able to full clear this week since there's only 4 bosses left that we haven't done, 3 of which we haven't attempted, but 1 that we have attempted. And Varimathras feels pretty easy overall. He has a patchwork fight with a couple of twists, so no big deal there. I like the instance overall. I like the raid overall. 11 bosses is a good size. Having said that, the difficulty issue really bugs me, and I'm very worried about how long this raid is going to last because we're starting to get our first glimpses through Legion that the content train is slowing down quite a bit. And if it slows or stays at this pace, I'm potentially very worried that we're not going to have a good experience with the end of Legion, where we might be in Antorus for an extended length of time. And if we're in there for super long periods of time, it's going to lose some of its luster, which is a shame because there is a lot in the raid to like. But if it lasts for, 12 months, 13 months, 14 months, then at the end of it, the only thing anyone's going to be able to remember is how shitty it was to be in there for that long. And that's really a shame because a lot of the end-tier raids that Blizzard has done this disservice to have actually been really good in their own right. I liked Dragon Soul for the most part. Could have done without the RP, or at least with an option to skip after those first couple pulls, but I liked it overall as a raid. Siege of Orgrimmar was incredible. It was a fantastic raid. Not up to the same standard as Throne of Thunder, but it was a great end-tier raid, and it had a good story to tell. It just kind of lasted far too long. Likewise, I really liked Hellfire Citadel, but after 13 months of it, I didn't. I stopped liking it specifically because I was in there for so long, which is unfortunate because it is actually a fairly well-designed raid. So if Antorus is going to last much longer than the 6 to 7 months we've had for Legion raid tiers to this point, there will be a legitimate problem on Blizzard's hands in terms of player retention and interest. And my hope is that my suspicion about Battle for Azeroth being, further along than we think is hopefully true, and that we'll see a beta at the start of the year to really push us towards that. I also feel like we definitely are in store for more content patches past 7.3.5. The story seems to be setting that up pretty well, including all the data mine bits. I will have new videos up this week talking about a few additional topics that are related to this. So if you liked this video, please be sure to subscribe and watch for those additional ones. We're going to be talking about the Antorus cinematic. And yes, I will do a full proper video with the cinematic playing. We're also going to be talking a bit about the 7.3.5 PTR. Because, boy, there's a lot of good, interesting stuff there. And we'll also be talking about the state of the game going into Battle for Azeroth, because there's a lot there, in addition to continuing Tanxiety series videos and some other goodies. So stay tuned for more. If you liked this video, again, please be sure to drop down a like or a comment or subscribe. If you didn't like it, you're always welcome to downvote and let me know what you thought in the comments. I do read them. I also have multiple social media accounts you can follow. Most of them will be linked down in the info box below. You can watch me stream 6 nights a week at twitch.tv/Kaylriene. I also have a long-form WordPress blog where I write a lot of my thoughts about World of Warcraft or MMOs in general, and that is over at kaylriene.wordpress.com. And then lastly, I also have a Twitter account that I keep up with pretty regularly, and that is over at Kaylriene. Again, all those linked down in the info box below. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you then.
Thank you.